Good morning. I'll call us to order, and Commissioner Carey will open the prayer, and then Commissioner Wheeler will lead in the pledge.
We'll all bow our heads. Heavenly Father, we thank you for a beautiful, beautiful day. Thank you for all the churches that we have. We thank you for all the great people that we have. We ask you to strengthen our hearts, strengthen our bodies. Always seek your guidance in everything we do. Amen.
Rise and salute the flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Since Commissioner Malone had a health concern about being here this morning, thank you for being flexible and last minute kind of tweaked the plan here to do Zoom for him to be able to participate. And also it's being live streamed also, right?
No.
No? Okay.
It will be posted after the meeting.
Will be posted after the meeting, okay.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome. And obviously this meeting was advertised to be here in this room, so it's open to the public to be here. But since he's participating electronically, we do need to vote that it's essential business when we approve our agenda. So thank you for approving the agenda. Thank you, Commissioner Carriger. Motion by Commissioner Carriger, second by Commissioner Wheeler. Anything else on that? And we need to do roll calls when we do our votes here, so bear with me just 1 second. Commissioner Malone?
Yes.
Commissioner Wheeler?
Yes.
Commissioner Carriger?
Yes.
Commissioner Tester's a yes. Also, Commissioner Malone, if you have any trouble hearing us, please let us know, because we're trying to wear masks and microphones and all this stuff. So.
I understand. Thank you.
Good. Second thing I need to do.
It makes y'all feel better. I could put a mask on, I suppose.
No comment.
Second thing we need to do is approve our minutes from the July 9th meeting. So does anyone have a motion or recommendations for changes to those minutes?
Move to approve. Second.
You weren't here, were you?
That's true.
I'll move for approval. That's right.
Motion from Commissioner Carriger.
Second from Malone.
Second from Commissioner Malone. Anything else on that before we roll call? All right, Commissioner Malone?
Yes.
Wheeler?
Yes.
Carriger?
Yes.
Tester is also a yes. All right. Now, Rule 12F. We thought we had last month that was ready for the commission meeting, but then in getting ready for the commission meeting, it came to my attention that the audit committee description still had some reference in there to when it and the ethics committee were both one and the same committee. So Allison has worked on that a little bit. Before we get into the meat of that, there was two other very small kind of typo type things that I picked up on. So I want to just knock those out real fast at the beginning here. At the end of the ethics description, I'll give you all a minute to find that. It's on the 3rd page.
Is that in the version that's taken to school?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. At the end of the ethics description, the bottom 3 lines, it says, well, I'll start 4 or 5 lines. Records of ethics committee shall be maintained by the secretary and shall be filed in the office of the county clerk, or they shall be open to the public inspection. That "the" just appeared at some point. I think after our last committee meetings, I think that should say open to public inspection.
Not the,
Yeah, and that's the way it was, I think, in our current rule too. I don't know quite how that got in there, but so if nobody has an issue with that one. And then the other one is in intergovernmental affairs. The last line before where it talks about who's on the terms, about 4 or 5 lines from the bottom. This committee shall engage state and federal elected representatives and other officials that are required to address matters being considering. That should be considered. All right, Commissioner Wheeler.
First of all, the name of the rule, it says standing committees, but we have a section on standing committees, and there really are other committees that are not standing committees, I don't think, but they're certainly not of the commission. They involve other people, or appointments, they're not commission. I wondered if we should have a section standing committees and then a section other committees. I'm sorry, I see that. Excuse me.
Yeah,
There's a G that said, I didn't see the G.
You're right. That was our intent last month was, we changed that G section to other committees.
I'm sorry, I see that. I missed that. And then the only other question I have is the Intergovernmental Affairs Committee truly a county committee? Is it created by the county to our rule, or is it a joint committee between these governmental entities that would not be subject to our rules? I don't think. If it's something we create, then maybe it goes there. But if it's something that's a joint committee created by these 3 entities, our rules wouldn't govern.
You know, if it's to me, we have a binder, and Teresa's did a lot of research on this in the past years. I'm not aware that there was a statute that formed the basis. Do you recall? We'll look into that today. Or I would, do you have the binder upstairs? Did you bring it back? Would that be helpful?
I don't know.
I don't
It's
think
not
there's a-
that big a deal, except that most of the time these committees are somewhat informally set up, maybe by the mayors or something like that. But I don't want us to presume that we have the ability to put rules on that committee if it's not a.
you know, Allison, I think you're right. We get on that committee back in, 09, with the city. It seemed like it was just kind of then an informal agreement between Johnson City mayors and George Jones.
I think Brady's on it. Is that right? On that committee.
But that's my recollection, years ago.
And I don't.
Well, you know,
think it's been-
the mayor has formed the regionalism committee, so it's something similar, I guess, that obviously is not referenced here.
And I think under the way I'm talking about these, it wouldn't be, because it's not a county committee. It's bigger than that. And I think to a certain degree deserves recognition of that by not being considered a county committee. And same thing here. I also don't know, because if it is a county committee, then I was going to question why we got the, I think the city manager is a perfect person to have on here, but I also think the town administrator might be more appropriate than the town mayor. That may just be preferences by those entities, which is fine, especially if it's a joint committee rather than a county committee. But I kind of didn't understand putting one of the executive of one versus the mayor and not putting the executive of the other versus the mayor.
Well, you're the attorney here. Is there a difference in the structure of the two, of the town and the city government, such that, because the city mayor is a commission member?
We have what's called a weak,
Elected by the commissioners.
right, but the town of Jonesboro has what's called a weak mayor system. The mayor has no authority. So really the person that makes decisions on day-to-day operations is the town administrator. The person that represents the board officially is the town administrator. So, because he's the only one who can take action. So that's where, I think a committee like this, the more the merrier. I'm not saying you shouldn't have the mayors on there, but I don't know, and I don't want to presume that the rules committee should be making that decision because we don't know exactly what all they do, except for perhaps Mr. Carriger having been on there and Commissioner Malone being on there now. But those committees should probably decide to make a. I just thought this one might ought to come out if it's not a county committee.
You mean remove this whole one completely?
Yes. Just like we don't have the regionalism committee.
Well, the other way to take that argument is we need to put the regionalism committee in here.
Well, why would the regionalism committee have to follow our rules?
I'm not saying it would, that's the other side of
Right.
what you're saying.
And I guess what I'm saying is rules should be of the county commission, not of anything broader than that. It's going to get confusing if we start putting in different sections in here, things that we have a relationship with ETSU, but we don't have a relationship with ETSU in the rules.
I wasn't around when this was created.
Well, I think that my memory serves, it's just an informal agreement between, I think it may have been Jane Meyer and George James, and that, because I can remember us meeting, I remember who was on it, what we talked about, and my recollection is it was just kind of, George picked, a couple of people, Jane would pick a couple, and I think Pete Peterson was on there, and George had, they had 3 folks on that, John Squibb, but I agree with Tim. If it is, as my memory says, just an informal agreement between the mayors, then I agree that I want to be part of our vision.
We just need to put the legal staff check on that.
Yeah.
If it's not a formal county committee that it come out.
Yeah.
Well, are we not the group that would want it to be a formal county committee?
But we have to have the agreement with those other 2 entities.
See what you're saying. And you think that may not have happened in the past.
No, and I'm not so sure that would be a good, we don't, I think we want this committee to be bigger than the county committee.
Well, I agree. I guess it seems like a little different than the rest of these. But if you read the description of the way we put it under G with other committees, well, actually, what we ended up doing was we put special committees under that, which is from time to time, as these may dictate, the board may desire to establish special or temporary committees, task forces, joint committees, and or other work groups, utilizing citizens of the county, members of the board, members of other boards, et cetera, et cetera. So, it kind of seems like a special committee if I was describing it as something.
Teresa's gone to get that research that we have, and I would also say the action that this committee, y'all might want to look at that, where it says that the committee shall discuss and recommend actions regarding matters of economic development, local governance, public safety, health, education, and welfare of the 3 local governments and its residents, in conjunction with it being a special committee. If the commission wanted to have a committee that was under its, authority, that it could convene, that I think that would be a consideration. Is it a special committee that's called to do that work?
I was going to say I wasn't around when it was formed, but I guess my thought about it's always just been it's a way to try to get the different bodies together to at least have some communication between them. But it hasn't, since I've been around, it's not always it's not always had somebody on it. It's not always functioned or had meetings. I think they may have at the very beginning of our last term, Mr. Carriger. But you said she's going to get something on that.
She's going to get, we have a research file that has the committee, and if there's anything that we have that shows when it was created, if it was created by resolution or something, you'll have the benefit of that this morning.
Okay. Did you have other items or is that? Okay. you want to go ahead and talk about the audit description while she's going to get that information. Then we'll come back to that. Jim. So, all right, the audit description. Let's see. Anybody have any thoughts on that? The only thing I had, and I talked to her for just a minute before the meeting about this, the part that she added in from TCA 93406, which is what Teresa handed out to us for the meeting. She tried to take, I think, the two, not want me to put words in your
No,
mouth.
I think
but
you're right. That's
I
exactly
think she
what I
tried
was.
to take the first two sentences of this and kind of combine them into one sentence. And if you look at the actual TCA language, it said, well, the rule right now says that this committee shall establish a process, the underlying part in the middle there. This committee shall establish a process for employers, taxpayers, and citizens to report suspected, et cetera, et cetera. The TCA code actually says, shall establish a process by which employers, taxpayers, or other citizens may confidentially report suspected illegal improper. So the word confidentially is in the TCA code, but it's not in the rule sentence. And that's a pretty important word, I think. And then down towards the end of that, where it's talking about the committee chair reporting, and I guess this is something we need to talk about or understand how that's intended to function, whether it's the committee reviews the information or just the chair. But down near the end of that, it says, reported to the comptroller of the state of Tennessee upon belief that it has occurred. In the TCA code, it actually says may have occurred. So those are two, I think, substantial changes there. And the way the two sentences were kind of come out together is in our rule, it sort of sounds like just the committee chair reviews the information. And I'm not sure exactly. I think maybe we need to talk about that in terms of how we want to.
Probably all of my experience has been in the business world, with the audit committee, bank, is independent, and they report directly to the board and to the bank regulators if there is a problem. So they're, fairly, the business world is a fairly independent committee. So that helps.
Allison, do you have any comments?
My first comment is that the plain meaning rule, when you look at the statute, says that it is the chair, and I think that having it being confidential, that's important. And just to go back about a year or so ago, you might remember that Mayor Grandy had posters put on county buildings that referred to the comptroller as the resource for reporting. Does that ring a bell to any of you? But it came up in a meeting at some point that he shared with you that he had done that. And those are posters that are available to the state, and they really should be posted, and he had them up. And I bring that up because this rule dovetails into that process that the state has, which is that if a citizen or a county official becomes aware of or believes that there is waste, fraud, abuse, etc., there's a process in state government for that to be reported. This committee then, it seems to be part of that philosophy. They dovetail together. And that's, when I read it, I understood it to mean that our local government then had a committee that was auditing and would be then a resource to report it. Then I did send you all this resolution creating the audit committee. That has the process in a little more detail, though it doesn't really address the question that you, Commissioner Tester, have brought up specifically about whether it goes to the full committee for determination, whether it goes to the comptroller. I mean, on the face of the statute, it says that reported to the chair, and the chair reports it if there's a belief. And you're exactly right. I was condensing that, and confidentiality is important. That would be the process the chair would have to use, regardless of whether it was in this rule. But why not make it clearer?
Well, a couple of thoughts I had. One was maybe we just use the 2 sentences from the TCA code, like exactly word for word, instead of trying to turn it into 1 sentence.
Let me be a devil's advocate. What if you had a committee of 5 and 4 of the members thought there was something improper, and the chairman chose that there was nothing improper?
Yeah.
Then what do we do?
I think the chairman does that at the chairman's risk, but the statute is pretty clear. It's the
Yeah.
chairman's duty to decide.
And that's why I wonder if it should be a recommendation of the committee rather than the chairman. To me, that's a legal question. I really don't.
Well, the other option I thought of, other than just taking these 2 sentences exactly word for word, is maybe just take the first sentence and leave the part about the chairman out of our rule. I mean, we can still say pursuant to 93406.
Well, my concern is exactly the opposite situation you're talking about.
Okay.
So let's say the committee votes 4-1 against the chair, that they don't think there's something improper. I think the chairman still has state statutory duty, which is not going to be clear if we're not careful. That and the chairman doesn't know what the statute says. We say in here that it's the committee making the decision, or we leave it out completely. If we're leaving out a pretty important duty that chairman has. Even 4 people say it's not improper. If the chairman believes it's improper, they got to do it.
Or to Commissioner Tester's point, maybe. And I totally agree. That's a great
May
catch.
have.
May have occurred.
Right,
And so
whether it
the-
did or not, I'm sorry, I'm not just saying
and-
that.
And I did too, because I was so focused on the belief aspect that I think that addresses then, is there a determination? No, because there doesn't have to be a determination. The question is, there's a belief that it may have. And so if there's a belief that it did, then that would suggest that there'd been a process and a good faith basis, a determination would have been made. So when I reference the plain meaning, I think that when someone has a duty to report something, when they have a belief that it may have occurred, then that's different than a determination that it has occurred by a committee.
It might be better than it was the committee making the decision, but I think that would take the state changing the statute.
Well, yeah, that's not really how the statute reads.
And they might not have changed it, but I don't think.
But if we think that is an important enough part of the statute that we put it in our rule,
I think believe I really think that's important for it.
then I'm thinking maybe we just word for word take these 2 sentences out of TCA and put them in here as 2 sentences instead of trying to combine it into one. I mean, anybody else have? Is the very beginning of that, let's see, looking at the TCA code now, it says an audit committee created pursuant to this chapter shall establish a process. So we can basically just say this committee shall establish a process.
And then by which the whole thing through the end to Comptroller of Treasury, or where are you?
Yeah, what do you guys think there? Looking at
Statute.
looking at the actual statute and just putting this language word for word in instead of the way we try to combine it in 2 sentences. So start with this committee shall establish a process by which employees, taxpayers, or other citizens may confidentially report suspected illegal, improper, wasteful, or fraudulent activity. If the information provided causes the chair of the audit committee to believe that illegal, improper, wasteful, or fraudulent activity may have occurred, then the chair of the audit committee shall report the information to the Office of the Comptroller of the Treasury. Do we stop there, or
I
we
would say, so
Go ahead.
TCA, the switch there instead of using the Title 8, Chapter 4, Part 5, that's confusing. I would say pursuant to TCA 93406, just like this one was got the draft.
93406.
People can Google that and find it. You cannot find Title 8, Chapter 4.5. That'll be too hard to find. Same thing. But it's,
And before I put this 2 sentences, I did have a draft that said this committee shall establish a process consistent with TCA 93406, and I left out all of it. And then I thought, well, since it hadn't been in the old rule, you would say, what is that?
spell it out.
So then I thought about spelling it out. So it could go either way for your benefit, but this statute was not previously referenced in the rule at all. So I think to that end, as the lawyer for the county, I would want to make sure that people were aware of it, because I think that the committee has been moving along, probably much thinking like, what does an audit do? And years later, they may not have looked at what their actual charge is. And so I would really urge y'all to share that with your colleagues so that they know.
Once the committee feel like, Commissioner Monk, you're being awful quiet. What do you think?
I'm agreeable with the changes, but I know reference to the code of ethics was deleted, but I'm wondering, where does the audit committee and the ethics committee, where do they meet, or where are they separate entities? It sounds like there's a lot of overlap between the two. But I'm agreeable with the changes proposed, the 2 sentences rather than 1.
That's a good question. You want to comment on that?
This is my thought process was, and I think I put it in my email to you to note that I left the word ethics still in the rule, because the impetus for me looking at this was at the last commission meeting, Commissioner Tester commented that ethics were still contained. But then when you look at the scope of audit, there's an ethical component. But I would say that the distinction is the code of ethics itself, because the code of ethics was adopted by Washington County, I think in 2007. It's separate and apart from these statutory duties. And while there's an ethical component to audit, the process of the ethics committee under the code of ethics is separate from the two. So they work in tandem at some level, that there may be overlap, that one prompts the other. But I think that when they got combined, it was probably thinking exactly like your question, Commissioner Malone. Aren't they the same? And I think they're the same but different. I think they have a different scope of authority under the law. To Commissioner Wheeler's point, there's statutory state law here, and the law that controls audit is separate and apart from the law that controls ethics. There are different statutes for ethics than there are for this audit committee, and I would recommend keeping them, clean and separate.
and there is differences in the outcome.
Thank you.
The ethics committee, they actually make a determination.
Right.
With the audit committee, they're just making a referral to the state. So there's, that makes, what you're saying makes sense to me, that they have a different purpose.
Different function.
There will be overlap in what they're looking at, but the outcomes will be different.
Yeah, and the reference in the audit committee description where it says "and ethics" about 5 lines down or so, I think that was directly in the county resolution when that was created.
And it's in the statute.
Because I read that.
And that's where there might be overlap in what they're looking at, because ethics, a violation of the ethics policy would be improper, that it might need to be reported to the state. But they wouldn't be deciding, yes, you violated the ethics rule. They would be saying, it may have happened, it goes to the state. That makes sense. Whereas our ethics committee would make a determination whether or not it was the county.
And that right there, after that word ethics, is where previously when they were combined, it had all that reference to the code of ethics and all that, which we're taking out because we've now created the ethics committee separately. All right, so Is everybody good then with the changes? And instead of the one sentence where she was referencing the underlined part in the middle, this committee shall establish, we're going to do the two sentences straight from the TCA code. Okay. Anything else on that before we return back to Commissioner Wheeler's question about intergovernmental affairs? Okay.
We need to take any action on that.
Well, I think at the end here, we'll just note that, I mean, assuming we have a big difference of agreement or something, but
Before you leave that, Teresa's already reviewed our research file, and there's nothing she just shared with me. There's no additional information for the background of that
intergovernmental affairs. Okay. All right, so going back to that,
Thank you.
Here's what I think it would be. It might have been a convenient place to just stick it, but our rules ought to be the rules of the commission. And I would suggest we consider taking that out. Keep this about committees that are either created by the commission or fall under the commission by state law, and not cloud that up before it really ought to be. And they ought to be free to have their own way they're going to operate. If it's a combined committee from 3 different government entities, we may be the overarching parent entity, if you will, but it's still not. We're definitely separate legal entities. I would suggest let them have their own decisions about how they're going to operate.
I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying, but I'm wondering if, I mean, that seems to me like something that we always struggle with is all of our bodies in our county cooperating and talking to each other. And I'm wondering if this was, I mean, as kind of a parent entity, if the county's intention was to like create this just as a way to encourage communication and cooperation. And
if so, it hasn't worked as far as that committee's function. I mean, it hasn't. Maybe it'd be better if the entities had their own responsibility to make the thing work, as opposed to being the county.
Well, has the county tried to make it work? I mean, have we reached out to the city and the town and said, hey, will you come serve on this and set a time for a meeting and all that kind of stuff? And if so, whose responsibility is that?
I don't think the rule as it stands now sets out whose responsibility that is.
I'm just wondering if, I mean, if we take it out completely, it's like we're saying, well, it's not important that we even talk to each other. But I mean, I think it's important, like, reason to be there, but maybe it's not in the right place, or maybe we need to do something different.
And I think there ought to be an interlocal agreement between the 3 governments. And maybe that would give everybody some responsibility to all be involved.
And some impetus to everybody.
Because this doesn't make the county mayor responsible for it. It doesn't make the chairman of the commission
That may be why they haven't met years.
Could be.
Just because there's
Yeah,
no,
I would like to suggest make this simple. We refer to the communications committee. And I mean, I think that would be the proper way to handle these things. Let them take a look at it, let them recommend, going forward, what's the best way to communicate with the town of John Paul, the city of Johnson City, the state legislature, what's the best way? Maybe that's a subject we ought to ask them to take a look at and make recommendations.
I think that's a good idea. Because we didn't have that in the past. I mean, that's a new thing that we just started, so.
Do we want to leave it in there for now then and take care of everything else? If the communication committee wants to change that to an interlocal agreement, we'll take it back out.
I mean, we could easily come back and make it up later.
Yep.
If you want to do that, remember that the Communications Task Force is a special committee and it had a specific scope. So you would want to make sure that when you ask them for that, because it was further to resolution. So just, if you want to have some verbiage is what I'm really saying today to make that request so that it gets carried over in a resolution, that would be important.
So we actually need to create a resolution to ask them to do that.
Well, or just if you want something that would, because the task force has a specific mandate and what they were to do and a time frame in which to do it. If you're adding something else to it, even though it's about communication, you know, it's like, just like with ethics, all of the rules have an ethical component. Everything that we do, it has a communications component. And that task force had a specific charge and mandate. So if this committee is saying that that would be helpful to revise that and incorporate more, I think you want to tell them, because you do have a member here, so he can carry the water, but maybe you want to make sure he knows exactly what the request is so that it gets carried through.
Is their mandate not pretty broad though?
I was gonna say, doesn't it say internal and external?
Well, you're talking about the task force, though, when you say committee, it actually, it's to provide non-binding strategic advice to Washington County and its communications director, whom we have today, whose job description is attached. It says they're charged with conducting a SWOT analysis, developing a communications plan, identifying the resources necessary to implement the plan. That's their mandate.
Well, I would say that could be part of the communication plan, and I think it's that the non-binding advice would be back to the committees and the commission to commission directly, as far as I'm concerned, to create an interlocal agreement. I think.
Perfect. And then that way you can carry that and out of here to that committee. Thank you. I just want to be sure that they dovetail.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know if the commission needs to vote on something, but if you feel like it would carry a little more weight with the communications task force, we can vote on it as a committee to send it or recommend it.
Take that paper.
Okay. All right. Commissioner Malone, any comments?
No, I actually missed the last little bit that was said. It may have been Commissioner Wheeler.
I'm just saying, I don't think we need to do a resolution to ask the communications task force to do that.
Okay.
But communications director and I are both here, and we can convey that, get that as part of what we're doing.
Yeah, maybe I was misunderstood. I didn't mean that we need a resolution. I just thought if this committee voted, like, to send it, maybe it carry a little more weight with the task force. If you thought that was a good idea, we can do that.
We can do that, but I don't think it's necessary.
Well, that's up to you all.
I agree.
If you want to make a motion, it's up to you. Okay.
The big picture, you're leaving it in or you're taking it out of
I
this
believe
revised
at the moment, we're talking about leaving it in for now. Of course, we did have that one little correction at the very end there that considering is considered just a grammar thing.
Mr. Chairman, can you accept the motion just to accept the changes that we agreed to today without any change to that government affairs committee?
Yeah, I think,
We capture the one of them.
yeah, I think we could just play a motion to recommend it to the full commission for approval as we reviewed it and discussed it today. Is that all right? Legal?
Yes,
feel like-
I've got that because it's really revisions to, it's revisions to the audit committee that we discussed verbatim. And then a small edit revision to the intergovernmental affairs. And overall, it will be a revised resolution for Rule 12F of the standing committees. Those two changes as to audit and intergovernmental affairs will be in the resolution. Is that right?
Yeah,
Very good.
and then that D at the end of ethics. that we taken out.
Yes, I've got that one as well. Thank you for pointing that out. So
Oh,
we'll
yeah.
make a
I'll
note of
second
3.
that motion.
All right, thank you. Second, Commissioner Carriger. And I think I told you about that on the phone, Allison, but if you're just going to revise the resolution from last month,
Yes,
at the very beginning, there was a whereas that referred to the Committee on Committees.
yes, I totally agree with that. I've made a note of that for Teresa and me.
Okay. All right, if there's no further discussion, we have a proper motion second on the floor. Let's do let me get my roll call in the same order here. All right, Malone,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Yes.
Carriger,
Yes.
Tester's a yes. Okay, thank you all very much. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
That no
Second.
request.
It does mean that. Depending on what happens between now and next month, how we do the agendas. Motion motion adjourned from Commissioner Carriger, second from Commissioner Malone, and let's take a roll call on that as well. Commissioner Malone,
Yes.
Wheeler,
Yes.
Carriger,
Yes.
Tester is a yes. Thank you all, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.